Burnout can be a real problem for parents, specifically parents of children with neurodiversity. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast. We're going to be talking about burnout, what it is, how we can hopefully avoid it, and why I started a ballet class yesterday in an attempt to avoid burning out this year. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello, if you're new around here, my name is Rhiannon Morgan. Everyone calls me Rhi. I am a mum of 4 children, all of which have autism. I have ADHD myself, which I only found out last year. So, there's a lot going on. I work full time. The only people that care for my children on a regular basis are myself and my husband. They don't ever stay away from us, like grandparents or anything. That's not an option for our family. So if anything needs to happen, we need to figure it out between us. And I think this is increasingly becoming an issue for families across the country, that traditionally, you say it takes a village, and there are more and more people that do not have a village. And I think that when your children have additional needs, when you are a SEN parent, special educational needs parent, and your child needs certain routine, certain things done in order to keep them happy, regulated. I think often you see so many parents, even if they have grandparents that are geographically close to them, they feel that they are not able to leave their children with them. And I notice a lot more of my children's friends who have, who are neurotypical then. And a lot of my friends that have neurotypical kids kind of lean on each other a lot more, like, someone will pick the kids up, someone else will pick the kids up. And I think often when you've got children on the spectrum specifically and they're used to routine, it can't just be like, oh, do you know what, I'm running late, someone else will grab my children. Because those children often will really not respond well if they're not prepared for that change. So there are lots and lots of different ways that there are additional pressures on parents of neurodiverse children. And don't get me wrong, like the pressures on parents these days, whether your children are neurodiverse or not, are intense, between the amount we're expected to, work like we don't have children and raise children like we don't work and all the things, that could be a whole conversation on its own. But ultimately, if you have got children with neurodiversity, there seems to be an additional layer of potential challenges that can contribute to burnout, as I myself have been finding. I think last year I was ill, as in physically ill, physically under the weather, physically germ-ridden for a really long time. And I'm not sure if you can tell by listening to my voice, actually, I'm not the healthiest right now, but I am taking steps to treat myself better than I was last year, and we'll go into that. But at the end of last year, I just kept getting really ill. And it was almost like I never really got over the last thing, whatever it was. So it started this sort of block of being ill. We were away on a trip and it had been a really intense few days. For some reason, I'd managed to get my feet really, really wet. I think it had rained a lot, and, old wives' tales about getting your feet wet and getting ill. Anyway, I felt so rough, so rough towards the end of the day. And yet the children still had a lot more they wanted to do. So I pushed through. And although my body was screaming, "Rhi, go to bed," I didn't want to let down the children. So I kept pushing through, a bit more caffeine, push through. And I was really unwell for the rest of the week when we got home. And then it just seemed, so this was mid-October, I want to say, it just seemed that I didn't have more than a day of feeling like, oh, I feel a bit better, before something else smacked me down. And then I was absolutely coughing my guts up. And I'm talking about like over this period between mid-October and probably mid-December, I was taking tablets most days because I was under the weather. I went back and forth the doctors. I was on multiple courses of antibiotics. I was using the thermometer that I have set aside for the children on myself, and I frequently had fevers. I just couldn't shake whichever germs these were. And while some other members of the family were under the weather during this period, none of them were ill for as long, none of them were as unwell, and certainly none of them got unwell over and over and over like I did. So we've got to look at, well, what was different then? Why why was this happening? Why was I getting so under the weather? And I had blood tests. They couldn't come up with anything conclusive. And I think I've concluded it's probably the same reason that when during COVID, does anyone remember this far back? During COVID, I got COVID, having not left the house actually. My husband went to return a curtain rod, and I was really scared of the world ending at this stage. I was like, please just leave it, it doesn't even matter. So we'd taken it back to Dunelm or somewhere, with a mask and everything, but he'd then been bleeped. Do you remember that time? How bad was the world where you got notified if you went near someone else? Anyway, so he got bleeped or whatever it was called, that he'd been in contact with someone with COVID. And all the rest of the house were pretty much asymptomatic, and I was so ill, and it took me a month to get over it. And really what had been happening all the way up to that point in December, I had been working so hard. I'd been up at 4:30 in the morning every morning. I'd been working, I'd been homeschooling the children, and I was the only one working because obviously it was COVID. So my husband's a builder, his business almost came to a stop. It was the pressure, and it was just that it was burnout. It was burnout that was stopping my body from getting better. And I honestly think that was kind of what was happening at the end of last year. So I had a lot going on with work, but also a lot going on in our personal lives that I haven't necessarily discussed publicly because other people are involved in things, but there was just so much going on. And I honestly believe the reason I just couldn't shake being so ill was because I was so burnt out. Now, ultimately, why do we run ourselves into the ground like this? Why do we run ourselves ragged as parents? Well, it's because we're trying to do our best for our children. So we're trying to give our children the experiences they want. We're trying to show up for them so that we can take care of them. Why do we try and earn money? Why do we work hard at our jobs? So that we can provide for our children and our families, so we can give them stability, so we can take them on holidays, so we can give them experiences, so we can buy food. All these things. We're doing it for our kids. So we're burning ourselves out with the best of intentions. We're burning ourselves out because we are trying to be good parents. That's what we're trying to do. But ultimately what ends up happening is when we burn ourselves out, we then cannot show up as our best parents. We cannot show up as our best selves. We've not got the energy, because ultimately when you've got full on flu and you are wiped out and you've got a fever and it hurts to move, you can't be your best. That's totally the opposite of what I want to be as a parent. I don't want to be in a position where I barely have the energy to pick up my head, let alone look after my children, and then still have to do it anyway. But you know what I mean? I'm not showing up as my best self by burning out. So ultimately, although the stuff we're doing to overload our workload is in the best of intentions, and it does have the right, it has the right intention behind it. Our meaning, what we want to achieve is right. And it's like, I want to give my children everything. I want to do all these things. And I want, the house to be nice for them. I want to take them places. And I want to earn money. And I want to look after them. And I want to make sure that they're okay. I want to make sure they're okay before I am. But if we're not making sure we're okay, we can't show up for them. So we can't do the thing that ultimately we want to do. And everything stops. And I think, although I've heard the cliches so many times about not being able to pour from an empty cup, we've all heard that one. And we've all heard, we've got to put on our oxygen mask first, which totally makes sense, because if you've got 3 small children with you then, which I'd have, so let's face it, our eldest, if he's flying with us, he's 20, you could probably put on his own oxygen mask. If I've got 3 small children with me that aren't necessarily knowing how to put on their own oxygen masks, and I don't put mine on first, the chances are I will probably pass out from lack of oxygen before I get to putting my 3 children's oxygen masks on. And that way maybe one will have them on, but I won't. And I'm like, it's okay because I've seen to my children, but actually maybe I haven't actually made sure they're okay. And because I've passed out because I've got my own oxygen mask on, I can't help them. So the reason we have to put on our own oxygen mask first is so that we can continue to breathe and help our children. And I'm aware that this is a cliche, and I'm aware that you've heard this before. But sometimes you hear things and you do not really hear them, because that's been the case for me. I have been hearing things but not really hearing them. And one of the best analogies that I've heard is, about like, you don't want to drop any balls. You're trying to keep the balls in the air, trying to juggle everything. And that is how it feels as a parent. And especially as a parent of neurodivergent children because, for example, I had a chat with one of my friends who has neurotypical children about breakfast food. And the way that I have, if you've ever seen my vlogs and things, organisation systems where we have one to use, one as a backup, and then when the backup item in this food cupboard is used, the backup cereal, the backup jar of whatever, then I order another one, and then we don't run out of things. And she's like, well, if my children, if we've run out of cereal, then they just have toast. I'm like, what? Hang on, hold the phone. They don't have a meltdown. It doesn't spoil the whole day because they're not having what they're expecting to have. They're not having what they're expecting to have. They have something different, and that's just shrugged off and fine. Yeah, she's like, yeah. I was like, whoa. Having only ever obviously parented neurodiverse children, it blows my mind to think that actually there is that possibility. Some parents don't have to deal with those things. So that is something off their mental load. So I think the extra load that I've realised on the mental load on some parents is the making sure you've got all the things, and the knowing that meltdowns will happen, and people's days, and perhaps sometimes entire families' days, will be ruined because someone's day will feel so shattered and so broken because something isn't there. And it's not coming from a place of tantruming, of not being able to get what they want, but it's like things aren't as I expected and now my world's crumbling kind of thing that sends children to meltdowns. So as parents of neurodivergent children, there's a lot more planning to do. There's a lot less kind of spontaneity that can happen. There's a lot less being able to rely on more acquaintance type friends. I feel that if you're leaving your neurodivergent children with someone, then there's probably a lot more handover, a lot more planning, a lot more making sure the child is comfortable, a lot more making sure they know their routines. If you know, you know. Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you do know. By the way, incidentally, if you are listening on the podcast rather than watching on YouTube, sorry, you can't comment, but you can always head to the YouTube channel to join in the comments. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, hello, although you can see me as well as hear me, you can join in the comments. But if you're just listening, because you can just listen to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, but if you want to join the conversation, please do head to the YouTube channel. If you are on the YouTube channel, by the way, this is a really good opportunity to just, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done already. I think over 60% of you that tune in are not subscribed, so I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and hit the like button as well, because likes are free. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. So there's all these different things, and the really good analogy I liked was, it's juggling the balls. Which balls can we drop? Some of them are glass balls, some of them are plastic bouncy balls. So yes, there is a lot going on. I've always been like, yeah, okay, I know I gotta put my own oxygen mask first, but what do you want me to stop doing? Because only I can do things. And this is a bit of a story I have in my own head for various reasons. Excuse me, my stomach's rumbling. This story of only I can do things. But again, that's a chat for another day. But basically what I'm saying is that I get it. I have heard the analogies. I've heard the oxygen mask on first. I've heard the pouring from an empty cup. And I've not really heard it or let it land, because I've just thought, well, what choice do I have? I've got to keep going because no one else is going to do it. But what I've realised is that the way I was going, the way I was behaving, the way I was pushing through was making me ill. And ultimately, all I want is the best for my children, and me being ill is not the best for my children. So ultimately, if I can't do it for myself, doing it for them kind of works for me. So I've made a couple of changes which have really helped. The first one is not even what I was going to talk about today, but I feel it's important, so I'm going to add it in. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this is a desk. This is a standing desk, a sit-stand desk. If I press this button here, the desk will raise and lower. And behind me, under that little sofa, there is a walking pad which folds in half. And now a lot of the time at my desk, I do walking and working. And the reason that I set this up initially was because the very first thing to go when life happened, so I was on a deadline, or the children were ill, or someone had a meltdown or something, was my exercise and taking care of myself that way. And being able to get in some steps while working at my desk has really, really helped me. So that, aside from the ballet, which we are going to get back to, has really helped me, because I've realised that when I move my body more, I don't get ill as much, and it helps me feel better. I feel more energized, because ultimately if the children are ill, I have to look after them. That's a priority, but work still has to get done. So the first thing out the window was exercise. So walking pad, any way you can just get in some more steps, if that is just walking while you're having a chat with a friend, walking the children to school rather than taking the car, whatever it is, if you can just fit in more steps, do it. It's the easy peasy way. It's going to be a game changer. But ballet, why ballet? Ballet is something I did so much growing up, and I am now 41. I haven't done ballet on a regular basis since I was a teenager. I did in my early 20s do a teaching qualification and teach dance classes to both adults and kids, but it was more like beginners or fitness level dance, so it was loads of fun, did stuff to musical theatre numbers, all that kind of thing. Loved it. Did that before I stopped doing that properly before Will was born, and Will is 13 this week. So yes, I did do more dancey-ish stuff more recently than I have done ballet, but still I haven't done that for over 13 years really on a regular basis. But ballet, I last did ballet in my teens, other than 1 or 2 classes that I did as like a drop-in at Pineapple Dance Studios when I was in London, just on a couple of occasions. Anyway, my daughter's ballet teacher was starting up an adult ballet class, and it was going to be in the day, and it was going to be at sort of a beginner level, so nothing too super taxing. And I've thought about doing stuff like this for, but I've always thought, oh, do you know what? It's a bit selfish to do that, because I've had this story in my head that I either need to be with my children and present with my children, or working to earn money to give experiences to my children. Because if I am giving up any time during the day where I should be working to earn money, I'm either giving up money I could be earning to give them food, clothes, and experiences, or I'm giving up time that I would then have to take off them by working on the weekend. So I always felt that doing things like this for myself was quote unquote selfish, and equally with the evenings. So if I wanted to do a class or something in the evenings, it's not something I've done, because I felt that that time I should be present with my children, or not. If not that, I should be working. And I felt that if I wasn't doing one of those two things, I was being a bad mother, which I'm aware when I say out loud is ridiculous, but just bear with me. Those are the thoughts going on in my head. And if you're honest, and I think a lot of you will have felt the same at some point, these are definitely messages that have come from somewhere way back in childhood or social media or whatever. We've not made these things up ourselves. They've come from other people, but I think a lot of us have had these thoughts. It does not make them true, but it's definitely things that have gone around in my head, and perhaps in yours too. So I realised that actually, having had this from various different places, I'm reading a book called Rest, about how rest is actually productive, which rest is not something I'm sure I even know how to do, so I'm going to continue to read that book and see what it says. But there's that. I went to a conference in London with my business coach, and that was all about driving your business forward and really like leveling up and improving your mindset to improve your business and things. And she did a whole section on fun and how we should be setting goals for fun things we want to do as well that are totally nothing to do with business. Because if we're not also having fun, then we're not being our best selves. We're not showing up as our best selves for our families or for our businesses. So basically, I've just been hearing this from a lot of different angles, and about how doing something for yourself and doing something creative in another way that's totally unrelated to your work, your family, your business can actually almost unlock your brain for when you come back to what you are supposed to be doing, your job, your family, whatever, and make you better at what you're doing and what you're aiming to do. So when this class came up, I thought, right, 2025, I want it to be the year where I don't burn out. This is my year where I feel like I want to step into this thriving, not surviving. I want to get off the hamster wheel and stop feeling like I've got so much to do. And it's not from a lack of being organized, because as you guys know, like, I spend my life getting organized, and I've got my planner stored. By the way, if you haven't got one of these, this thing has flipping changed my life. I will link this planner. This organized life and gratitude planner is flipping changed my life. If you can't see if you're listening on the podcast, but I'm holding up my planner. It's changed my life. I'll put the link below if you want to get yours. So it's not like I'm being disorganized and not getting enough done. it's almost this mindset of, oh, I've got too much to do. And because I keep telling myself I've got too much to do and I haven't got enough time, it kind of makes it true. So I thought, right, I'm going to try this. It's going to be an hour, 1 day a week while they're in school. It'll probably be 2 hours out of the day, won't it? By the time I've driven there, done the thing and driven back. And I thought, I'll try it. I'll see how it goes. And if it's taking too much time away from my work, then, or if it's not for me, I don't enjoy it, perhaps I won't enjoy it anymore, then I won't carry on. I'll just give it a go. I'll do the trial a few weeks and then I'll stop. And I went yesterday. I went to that ballet class and it all felt so familiar, just in such an alive, I felt like myself again. I can't even tell you. It felt amazing. And there were women there that had danced before. You could see that. There were women there that had never danced before and they were clearly enjoying it. And it just felt so good. It felt so like it was all coming back to me. The terminology, like it's all deep in there in my brain somewhere. It's all in my body somewhere because in a way it all felt so familiar. It also felt like, wow, last time I did this, my body didn't feel like this. And I think it made me realize that there is perhaps work to be done to improve my fitness and get it to the level I'd like it to be at, to feel more and more like myself. But honestly, it made me feel amazing and so alive and inspired. And I came back with so many ideas. I came back knowing I had fewer hours to get things done, and yet my list was long, and yet I smashed through it. And it's like I was more productive because I'd done this thing. So I guess what I want to tell you is, although it may seem totally counterintuitive to when you feel burnt out, overwhelmed, and like you've got too much on your plate, to take on something else that is an optional thing, that is potentially seen as a selfish thing because it's just for you, ultimately, apologies, my stomach's rumbling again. Ultimately, when I got home later that day, I was more productive in my work and I was more energized and better equipped to show up and be the kind of mother I wanted to be with my children. So if there is something that you have been thinking, oh, do you know what? I used to do that. I used to love that. A hobby, a type of fitness. And I think the caveat to this is it has to be something that excites you. I have tried so many times to become a runner and to do Couch to 5K. And every time I've quit because I've just realized I hate it. So if you want to take something on, it needs to be something that excites you, something that's going to make you feel alive, something, and this is going to be different for every person. So maybe you did horse riding as a teenager and maybe you do that every now and again. Maybe it's dancing. I mean, that's an obvious one for me to talk about because that's the one I can kind of relate to. But maybe it's just making time to read books. Maybe you used to love reading books and now you don't take time to do that. Maybe it's meeting up with friends. It needs to be something that you're not going to dread and be like, oh, I've got to do this because I really thought it would be really good to be a runner and I'd love to say I've run a 10K or whatever, but you don't actually love the running, This ballet class, when I showed up, I pinned my hair up in my bun and I bought ballet shoes for the first time in a really long time. And as I was moving, I actually felt great. And I came home and I felt great. And then that had a ripple effect through the rest of my day. And I woke up this morning, even though you can probably hear, I've still got a cold. I'm not ill. I still have a cold. I still feel sound a bit odd. But I feel more energized and excited, and it's just had a positive effect on all areas of my life. So yes, it is counterintuitive to add something in when you are already feeling like you're maxed out. But I would love you to commit to giving it a go, because I don't know what kind of magic occurs, but it's like the universe rearranges things. And when I got back, I got everything I needed to get done that day, even though I didn't have a full day, and somehow I did. It's like, because I was more energized, I plied through it all quicker. I don't know. I can't even tell you how it worked, but just that it did. And I'd love for you to give it a go. So I'd love for you to let me know in the comments, what's a hobby that you used to do but you haven't done for ages, that maybe it kind of think that thinking about picking it up again makes you go, ooh. Like if I could wave a magic wand and give you the time that you don't believe you have, what would you love to do? What would I be using my magic wand to give you? Let me know down in the comments. And then is there a way you can work that into your life somehow? Maybe taking an hour out of the day while your children are in school, or if your children are with a relative, leaving them there 1 extra hour every now and again to go and do this thing, or relying on your spouse and just, discussing together and being like, right, I am close to burnout. I need some time to do something for myself, to look after my health or my mental health or my self-care, so that I don't burn out totally, because then you're going to be solo parenting because I'm going to be flawed. So ultimately, let's arrange this between us so that we have got time, and let's arrange some time where I get some time to myself and some time where you get some time to yourself, because we'll all be better for it. I would love to hear down in the comments, and like I said, you're going to have to head to YouTube, aren't you, if you're listening, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on what you'd love to be able to do, and if even better, if you can commit to giving something a go, even if it's just in a small way. So being able to pick something to do to help take care of your mental and physical health is massively going to help you avoid burning out. But another really key component to burnout is just not sleeping enough. It sounds really, really obvious, but if we don't sleep enough, we're going to get ill more. We're just going to feel fried. It's just going to feel awful. It's going to be horrific. And I think this is a problem that a lot of us have for lots and lots of different reasons, especially children with additional needs. If you've got children with additional needs, then you've probably got a lot on your mind, a lot of worries, just a lot going on in your brain that perhaps even when you're in bed, you've got the opportunity to sleep, you're not falling asleep fast enough and you're not getting the sleep and you're feeling rough for it. Well, if you click on the video on screen, then I've got a whole episode where we talk about the best ways to maximize the amount of sleep that we can get, even if we've got really wired ADHD brains that do not want to let us sleep. So click over there or check out my Patreon for some early release videos, and I'll see you over there. Like and subscribe and all the things if you're listening on the podcast too. Bye.